Part 19. Pirate's Bounty Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 190. Writing has the advantages of writing, and there are also advantages of not writing. The advantage of writing is that when the pirates see the four characters Pirate Hunter, they feel that they are not strong enough and turn around and run away. But now, the bad thing is that the pirates who only regarded the ship as an ordinary merchant ship rushed over every now and then. When they saw the bounty, Luogu even cried. They are definitely not pirates. They just plan to board the ship to eat and drink. Looking at a group of pirates tied with ropes on the deck with an average bounty of around million, Luogu was very sad. It has been almost half a month since I left the capital of Seven Waters. It's this kind of thing every day. Although there are a lot of them, it really feels like a fly's legs. Want it? Put it on the boat for food. Please do not. It feels like a pity to let it go. After all, if it is more than million, it will become million. Thinking of this, Luogu decided to throw them into the lower prison. Sitting on a chair on the deck, basking in the sun and reading a book, my other hand was still exercising. It's nice to have this peaceful rhythm on a new day. Luogu put down the book, took a sip of the drink next to him, and then turned around to see a bird flying down from the sky, dropped a newspaper, and started bargaining with Makita. Makita has no talent in this area, and she probably forgot to set the skill points. She gives as much as the bird wants. Then he rushed over with the newspaper and shouted, "The incident on Judiciary Island has been resolved and a new reward list has been issued." The newspaper was delivered to him, and Luogu glanced at it. The overall incident was defined as a pirate attack, and naturally there were different reward amounts for several repeat offenders. After reading them one by one, there is no difference from them in this world in the original book. Sure enough, the main force is still very expensive. What should be treated as a pet is the price of a pet. Luogu shook his head, threw the reward list aside, and reopened the newspaper. Looking at it, a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. In the entire newspaper, not a single sentence mentioned him. He tapped his finger on the table, and asked Makita to bring the phone bug. After a familiar number was broadcast, soon the call came through. "Who is it?" The person who answered the phone was panting a bit too much. "What about training?" Luogu was a little curious. "So, where do you usually put the phone bug? Why is there a chance to answer the phone during training?" "Rogu." Lester's angry voice came, "You are still alive." "Unfortunately, you are still alive and well." Luogu smiled, "And you, it looks like you are working hard." "Humph, I thought you were dead." "I plan to train well and then go to the sea to avenge you." "Isn't that right?" Luogu said with a half smile. "As early as half a month ago, you should have got the news that I am still alive. After all, with Blackbeard's head and a big pirate like Ace, you can't possibly no message received." "Then what's the matter? It's you, who knows what kind of cat or dog it is, whether it's a human or an animal. I haven't seen you, and I haven't received your call from the street. Who knows whether you are dead or alive?" There was a strong resentment in Lester's tone. Luogu was a little helpless, looking up at the sky. He felt that the sunshine was good. If there was no dark cloud not far away, it would probably be better. The sky is going to change. "Well, you got it?" "Yeah." Luogu nodded. "Isn't that dark cloud clearly visible? So, what is going on with your news channel? Why do you already know what we just learned here?" Lester said, "There have been some very strange rumors recently, saying that the identity of Ace who was caught is not simple. Because of this matter, the upper echelons of the Navy are already turbulent. Also, the interior of the Navy, it is very likely that there is a problem. Let's talk about the case of Judiciary Island. There are always some unknown shadows in it. For this matter, the investigation has been stepped up here. I heard that there is an internal navy that can change itself. Kind of person. Luogu blinked his eyes. It was so pitiful that he didn't ask anything. However, these few words of Lester revealed something very interesting. Luogu thought thoughtfully and said, "Isn't Ace's identity the pirate with white beard? He has other identities." "There is still confirmation of this matter," Lester said. "I don't know what will happen in the end. Anyway, there was indeed such a rumor for a while before this, but it suddenly disappeared. From my intuition, there must be a kind of wind and rain is coming, changing the rhythm of the sky." Luogu nodded, thought of some possibilities, and finally shook his head. This matter is considered to have come to an end for him, and what can be done has basically been done. He didn't want to get involved in any problems that might arise from this. However, he is very interested in another matter. After all, it involves him a lot. You said that there is a problem within the Navy and it is involved with the Judiciary Island. Those pirates are involved. What about this person? Lester hesitated for a moment. "I'm telling you, but I can't tell you outside." "Let me tell you, this thing is a bit scary. I heard that when the group of pirates attacked Judiciary Island, someone changed his appearance. Transformed into the appearance of Spondam, the supreme commander at the time, and personally issued the order to lower the suspension bridge, which was also the direct reason why the pirates easily invaded Judiciary Island. But I also heard that this matter was discovered by someone at that time." Lester hadn't finished speaking, but because the person who discovered it at the time wanted to fight the pirates, he deliberately held it back. All this time. It wasn't until the pirates stepped onto the suspension bridge that the man was exposed. And he was definitely from the Navy because he knew how to use the sixth form. By the way, you probably don't know what the sixth form is, and I've been learning about it recently. But I am learning the iron blocks among the 6 postures to enhance my own defense. If you want to know, you have to beg me, please beg me, and I will tell you." The corner of Luogu's mouth twitched. After making this call, is there such an unexpected gain? He pinched his eyebrows gently. "First of all, how is the current investigation progress? Can anyone be found?" "There seems to be no progress. The Navy's system is too huge, and the results of the investigation are not satisfactory." Lester sighed and said, "This matter will probably become an unsolved case in the end. Instead, it is the identity of the previous ace, always gives me a bad feeling." "What identity do you think Ace has?" "Well, he is the grandson of your Lieutenant General Garp," Luogu said casually, with a hint of amusement in his eyes. Pirate's bounty don't run away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 191. Lester on the other end of the phone bug seemed to be shocked, and he didn't speak for a while. After coming back to his senses, the phone bug's expression was very realistic, which reflected Lester's shock very well. "It's actually like this." Then the next second he reacted. He said, "Then you are finished. If you are in the capital of 7 Waters, I suggest you run quickly. I heard that Lieutenant General Garp seems to be acting near there recently. Maybe he will go to the capital of 7 Waters." "When did the Lieutenant General's whereabouts become information that a junior officer like you could know?" Luogu said with a half smile. "What do you mean by a junior officer? I think you should apologize to me for this issue." "I reject." "Why?" "Because you are a junior officer, and, not long ago, Lieutenant General Garp found me," Luogu said with a smile, "and I am still alive." Lester was silent for a moment, and then said, "This can only show that he has our pride as a Navy." "Well, so it doesn't actually matter what Ace's identity is," Luogu said with a smile. "Besides, the old man should have a way to solve this problem." "It should be," Lester suddenly realized at this moment. "Let me tell you, why did this matter come to nothing in the end? It must be a game between the upper management. In this way, there will probably be no problem in the end. Then who knows?" Luogu shook his head. "There are too many possible problems, and no one can be sure that nothing will happen, but I think that since it can be temporarily calmed down, it is probably not impossible to calm down forever. Horrible. I felt like I saw the dark side of the world, Lester said. You haven't seen the darkness of this world yet. The corner of Luogu's mouth twitched, thinking of some guys with hoods on their heads. Lester on the opposite side seemed a little silent. After a while, he finally spoke. What are your plans next? Not to mention the sequelae of the Ace incident on your Navy, there should be some problems at sea. Luogu said with a smile. I wonder if you are interested. Help me collect some relevant information. If I enter the new if the world directly meets Whitebeard, it probably won't end well. You actually know how to be afraid. Lester was stunned. I'm not afraid, Luogu breathed out softly. I just don't want to eat such a big meal so soon. I'm worried that I can't digest it. Obviously because of fear. Lester curled his lips. Okay, I will help you pay attention to this matter, and I will still be contacted by phone bugs. Speaking of which, I will probably accept a special offer for a few months here. When the training is over, they should be sent directly to the new world. Luogu nodded slightly. Very good. In this way, my tentacles have spread to the new world. Why does it feel like I have become your pioneer? As a pirate hunter, can you not speak in the tone of a villain? Lester was a little unhappy. Also, why do you use tentacles to describe me? Those who underestimate the tentacles will not end well. Maybe your life is not as good as a tentacles. Luogu chuckled. Looking more and more like a villain, Lester smacked his lips. Tell me about that battle. This matter has caused quite a stir within the Navy. Your name has been mentioned recently within the Navy. The most. I think there will probably be people who want you to join the Navy. Moreover, the position that can be given to you is definitely not low, and it is possible to directly become a general. Not interested in. Luogu shook his head. The Navy, and the like, if they caught someone, they couldn't get the bounty. Although they could indeed make some money on their own side, they lost half of the profit. This is really not considered by him. Sure enough, it's still the case. Lester sighed. Just keep going like this. Sooner or later, you will know the benefits of the Navy. Also, do you want to know the training method of iron blocks? That depends on whether you want to tell me or not. In the end, of course, Luogu got the training method of the iron block. To be honest, this made Luogu feel a little embarrassed. Lester's trust in him is absolutely %, but it seems that he is always taking advantage of him. Hey, it seems that we really have to make friends. Luogu patted his face. He didn't know what was going on with him. He was obviously not a conspiracy theorist in the past, let alone make something casually conspiracy tricks out. How come now, no matter what happens, I like to use this method to speculate and act as a guideline? I want to change it in the future. Let's change it in a limited way. While practicing the skill of iron block, Luogu nodded like this. Mikita's yelling suddenly came from next to his ears, and after a while, Dashiki, who was swinging a sword, was also attracted, and the two leaned against the ship's side with a rope, wondering what the hell they were doing. Luogu pretended not to see it, and after a while, he heard a bang, as if something had fallen on the deck. Luogu frowned. What is it? As soon as he said this, he saw an extra wooden barrel on the deck. Wooden barrel with flag and text Poseidon Royal Treasure in front. Luogu just glanced at it and was stunned. Then he watched Mikita and Dashki bring the barrel to them as if they were offering treasures. Captain, Captain, this wine is dedicated to God. After a long wandering, it must be very mellow. Fortunately, I have good eyesight. For a moment, I just found out, Captain, you can have 2 more drinks at noon. Luogu raised his eyebrows and looked around thoughtfully. As a result, I couldn't see anything strange. I couldn't help pinching my chin, so, it's just an unexpected coincidence. What a coincidence. Dashki looked at Luogu and seemed to be different from what he imagined. He couldn't help but ask, has the captain discovered anything? It's not like I discovered it, Luogu scratched his head and said, I just heard a rumor that the wine offered to gods floating on the sea is actually a signpost for stepping into the Devil's Triangle. Once opened, it is like stepping into the door to the dark world. Mikita's face turned pale. Captain, don't scare me. She was trembling, she was really scared. Daisuke shook her head, it's all a lie. Luogu laughed, of course it's a lie, it's a good thing. After saying that, he turned the blade, untied the rope above, and directly opened the lid of the wine barrel. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate's Bounty Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 192. The red light soared into the sky, seeming to ignite the entire sky in an instant. There was a smile on the corner of Luogu's mouth, and he looked up at the red light in the sky, but Mikita and Daisuke next to him couldn't smile. What Luogu said just now is very obvious, road signs in the Devil's Triangle. Now it has been proved that what is placed in this wine barrel is indeed not wine, but a red thing that resembles a signal flare. Does this mean that the three of them are about to step into the door of the dark world? When thinking this way, even Daisuke was a little scared. She is not afraid of danger, not worried about pirates, and is willing to fight desperately with pirates. But in the face of the mysterious Devil's Triangle, this situation is completely out of human control, and there is still an indescribable uneasiness. As the two people looked at each other, the sky suddenly became dark, and heavy rain suddenly poured down without warning. Regardless of the terror of the Devil's Triangle, the two men immediately performed their duties and began to help stabilize the boat to prevent it from capsizing in the storm. Holding a knife in his hand, Luogu silently looked up at the sky. The rain fell on him and dripped on the deck along the blade. The eyes were slightly closed, and when they opened again, the light in the eyes was flickering. I've never seen such an active pirate. He muttered to himself, but as if he had thought of something, he muttered with a weird expression, except for a certain hypnotist. No one knew better than him the origin of this wine barrel and what it was about to face. Moonlight Moria. Luogu has always thought that this name sounds nice, but when he thinks of moonlight, he always inevitably thinks of another person. With a crescent moon on his back, a man with bright red blood-colored hair. But Moonlight Moria obviously doesn't have that kind of image, and it's rather off-putting. Whistling gently, he returned to his original position and sat down in the rain. The books had been taken away. He was a little bored, and the drinks on the table were mixed with the rain. This made him sigh involuntarily, it's too difficult for me. Storms can appear, and naturally there is a moment to stop. The sudden weather matched the atmosphere just now. Suddenly, it was cloudy, but it dissipated quickly. It's just that the sky didn't brighten up because of it. Mishita and Daisuke appeared in front of Luogu with water stains all over their bodies. Captain, what should we do now? Yeah, Mikita said hastily, God knows what will happen if I opened that damn thing just now. Let's go quickly. The ship was actually sailing all the time, and Mikita seemed a little incoherent. Luogu glanced at them, and was suddenly startled. He changed his gaze unnaturally, shook his head and said, Don't be too panicked, it's the most terrifying thing in this sea. Having said that, it's a bit stuck. There are so many terrifying things, unknown secrets, powerful enemies, despicable humanity, and arrogant justice, all of them are terrifying. Immediately shook his head, let it be, don't worry, I'm here. Nothing is as good as these words. Mikita immediately let go of her heart, and patted her chest, that's right, the captain is still here, what are you afraid of? Daisuke shuddered and said, I'm not afraid of anything else, but I'm worried that I might encounter something that I can't explain. If I can't even cut it off with a blade, it would be terrible. Before that, I think you should go back and change a set of clothes. Luogu finally took his gaze away from the other side, and put it on the two of them. It's too shameful. The two women didn't seem to be aware of this. They looked at each other wonderingly, and found that it was pretty good. That is to say, the clothes are slightly transparent, and nothing can be seen. Or maybe the captain finally realized that they were women. Mishita suddenly felt proud. Captain, why am I listening? You seem a little nervous. The corner of Luogu's mouth twitched. If you don't change your clothes, I will change them. After returning to the cabin on the second floor, he took a shower and changed his clothes to make his body dry, but Luogu didn't go out, just sat by the table. He picked up the book casually, looked at it twice, and couldn't read it any longer. It must be holding back hard. Luogu felt that there was a reason why he was upset and irritable. How should I put it? After being a vegetarian for such a long time, as a man, I always have the urge to explode. Didn't it mean that after being single for a long time, even seeing a sow makes her look pretty? What's more, these two on my boat are really handsome. Although Makita looks like a silly big sister every day, this girl is really good looking. Dashki is definitely not bad, and as a Navy, she has a heroic appearance and is very. Thinking of this, Luogu quickly shook his head. This was definitely a sign of something. If this continues, will I have to turn into a werewolf on a full moon night? I can't think about it blindly. Fortunately, at this time, there was a knock on the door, and Makita came in carrying a tray with a black teapot and teacups on it. Captain, have a sip of tea. She put the tray on the table and peeked at Luogu. Luogu had a calm expression, hummed slightly, put the tray down, and Mishita coughed. Luogu looked at her puzzled. Well, this girl changed her clothes. She looks very young, beautiful. Luogu frowned. Are you planning to go on a blind date dressed like this? The signal in the wine barrel has already flown out, and it is estimated that it will arrive at its destination soon. Now dressed like this, how can I still fight in a while? I have even put on my skirt. Are you really not worried about being exposed? Hurry back and change into a set of clothes, get ready for battle, and change into a pair of pants. Rogu tapped his fingers on the table. Oh, Makita, who was originally full of excitement, was suddenly bored by the boss. After muttering something in a low voice, she turned and went out. Luogu frowned. What's going on? While he was mumbling, Daska's exclamation came from outside. Captain, Mishita, come out quickly, we are being eaten. Luogu cheered up and immediately walked out of the room. After taking a few steps outside, there was the sound of footsteps behind her, and when she turned her head, she saw Makita pulling up her trousers and following her out. Luogu's face darkened. It's too shameful. He jumped up and came to the first deck, and saw the big ship passing through a gate like lips and teeth, and entering the tall enclosure. And not far away, shrouded in gloom, there was a small island. Pirate's Bounty. Don't run away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 193. Bookmark URL to continue reading next time. The scene in front of them was a bit shocking. Dashki and Makita, who had just put on pants, were completely confused. Captain of the ship. Mishita grabbed Luogu's arm. What the hell is going on? Where is this place? Well, as you can see, this is probably a haunted island. Luogu's voice was light, as if he had said something insignificant. The two people around were instantly terrified. But Luogu's eyes were full of excitement. In comparison, don't you find it interesting? What other interesting things will happen here? Both girls collapsed a little. At this moment, they could feel that everything around them seemed to be full of strong terror. Luogu smiled and said, why, our ship will appear here. Does this need to be said? Mishita seemed to be extremely responsive at this time. Luogu immediately looked at her excitedly. Let me tell you what the reason is. Of course it's because I was cursed by the devil. Mishita said, we shouldn't have opened that barrel before. We knew it was the door to hell, so why did we have to open it? Captain, what should we do now? Luogu was stunned for a while, then sighed helplessly, sure enough, I shouldn't count on you. Dashki took a deep breath, I don't believe there are ghosts in this world. There are completely unscientific things like devil fruit in this world, why can't there be ghosts? Luogu shrugged his shoulders, of course, I don't think we came here because of the ghosts. I think it might be because of people. And this person is probably on this ship. Tashiki and Makita immediately looked at each other, and then nodded at the same time, indicating that the two of them are fine. Then they looked at Luogu suspiciously together. Luogu's face suddenly turned black, and the veins on his forehead throbbed. I think, no matter what you want to say, it's best to think carefully before speaking. The two people immediately waved their hands, we are not going to say anything. Very good, then just listen to me. Luogu sighed and could only say, I believe that everything in this world has a reason. There is a saying that is often said that there is no love without reason, and there is no hate without reason. Of course, I don't particularly agree with the saying that there is no such thing as love without a reason. After all, that kind of thing is probably more mysterious than a ghost. But there should be a reason for everything. After the wine barrel in front of the Poseidon royal treasure was opened, a signal flare was fired. If only as a curse, to whom is its flare directed? It's just a curse, why should we emit a signal? It seems logically unreasonable. From this, my guess is that the signal flare may have guided some interesting things to appear on our ship. Then the ship came here under the operation of these interesting beings. When Luogu said this, he glanced around and said with a smile, am I right? What is the name of one of the three weirdos on the terrifying three-mast sail? Does he have a leopard head? He still remembered that under Moonlight Maria, there was a strange person who could be invisible. He doesn't look much like a human being. I've forgotten exactly what he looks like, and I can't even remember his name. After talking, there was silence. After a while, there was still no response, and it seemed faintly that a crow flew across the sky, leaving behind a line of crow droppings. Mishita tugged on Luogu's sleeve and said, did you guess wrong? Luogu's face turned dark and he nodded gently, very good, you haven't come out yet, right? Don't wait for me to catch you out later. Dashiki and Mikita looked at each other, and they both felt that their own captain seemed a bit out of control. As an excellent crew member, even in such an environment that may be haunted at any time, he cannot let his captain be so frustrated. At that moment, the two people nodded at the same time, and Mishita said loudly, so that's it? The captain is right. I have already seen the shadow of that guy. That's right, the guy is trying to lower the anchor now. Dashki said, I saw it too. As soon as I said this, I suddenly heard the sound of creaking gears, which was the sound of the anchor about to fall. However, the sound just sounded for a while, and I immediately listened to it. The anchor about to fall hangs halfway. In mid-air, the air suddenly became quiet. Both Dashki and Mishita were sweating on their foreheads, and Mishita kept looking at Dashki. The message in her eyes was, you really saw it? Dasaki's eyes are like a monitor, and the words revealed are all question marks. Obviously she just made it up. Rogu was undoubtedly the calmest among them, and whispered to Makita, go to the kitchen to find flour and put it on the deck. The moment the voice fell, the figure flashed, and he had already arrived at the position of controlling the anchor. The blade flashed, and a round of blades swept past. In the next second, he felt the wind blowing past his ears, turned around suddenly, and kicked it out. P.S. Book friends, I am a poor little pure author. Recently, many readers have reported that they cannot find the entrance to reading. I now recommend a free novel app that supports novel downloads, listening to books, 0 ads, and multiple reading modes. It can almost find all the books on the internet. For details, please spend half a minute following the WeChat official account bookfinder in the upper right corner of WeChat. Click the account, add a friend, select official account, enter, search and add the official account, and then press just follow the instructions. Book friends, please pay attention. The feeling of kicking the person immediately spread from the bottom of the foot to the heart, but the kick just now was not prepared, the strength was not used well, and there was no way to cause too much injury to the opponent. At this time Mikita had already rushed into the kitchen. Luogu said to Daisuke, "Be careful." After finishing speaking, he simply closed his eyes. Before the deck is dusted with flour, the eyes are of little use, it is better to close them and enhance the other senses. The wind in the air, the flowing trajectory, the smell, the sound of waves crashing in his ears, the salty smell of sea water, all kinds of other senses were expanded. Faintly, Luogu captured the breath like a beast, and a beating heart. Suddenly, he thrust forward and placed one hand on the handle of the knife. The moment the person arrived, the blade also arrived. The sharp blade pierced through the void, and there was a smell of blood. Immediately there was blood dripping on the ground, and Dashki's eyes lit up. "I saw it, it really happened." The moment the voice fell, his figure flashed and he rushed away. But it was all in vain. It happened that Mishita came out from the kitchen with a large basin of flour and raised her hand with great effort. There was no waste at all, and Dashki suddenly became much fairer. Luogu was stunned by this wave of operations. Daisuke opened his mouth, a row of small white teeth were exposed on his snow-white face. Feeling blessed, Luogu simply said to Dashki, "Use your speed to spread the flour on your body on the deck. Remember the domain name in 1 second. Pirate's Bounty, don't run away." Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 194. What? Daisuke was stunned for a moment, and only after he came back to his senses did he understand what Luogu meant, and immediately turned into a gust of wind without saying a word. In an instant, the sky began to rain. The whole world suddenly turned white. In the white snow, a tall and thin figure appeared, looking at the changes in front of him with a confused expression. Well, in fact, only an outline can be seen, and the face cannot be seen. But it is estimated that he can only choose to be confused about the current situation. He turned around as if intending to escape, but in the next second, Luogu's sword was already in front of him. Being able to see and not being able to see are two completely different things. Luogu's sword is not something ordinary people can dodge. Even people with the power of knowledge and color may not be able to do it, let alone the person in front of them. In the next second, a blood stain suddenly burst out on his body, and Lao Gao fell to the ground with a bang. But he was still tenacious, he got up on the ground and was about to run away. One moment of rain. A cold voice sounded, and in the next second, the colorful sword light suddenly became brilliant. The figure who was running away paused, his body was covered in blood for an instant, and when the sword light dissipated, he was already kneeling on the ground. Luogu came up to take a look and couldn't help but grin. It can be seen that Daisuke has really worked hard recently. Ichigire's skill has been fully developed. At this moment, with her speed and the sword light, she slashed hundreds of swords. Almost in the blink of an eye, the person in front of him turned into a blood gourd. Not bad. Luogu felt that if he did a good job, he should be praised. He gave a thumbs up to Daisuke, who was covered in snow and was even whiter than the fallen one in front of him. Dashki seemed a little embarrassed, maybe a little blushing, and lowered his head slightly, but the exact color of his face was all covered in white flour, making it difficult to see clearly. At this time, the one lying on the ground seems to be planning to get up and run away again. I have to admire their tenacity of vitality. They are still able to move after enduring this level of damage. But just when he successfully supported his body, a figure descended from the sky. Clang! Fortunately, it is a reinforced deck. If this was replaced with the previous one, it would probably be broken immediately. Mikita raised her brows upright, sat on the man's body with a ferocious face, and punched him on the head. This punch is also no small matter. After such a long period of training, she has gradually applied her abilities to fighting skills. The punch he swung suddenly weighed tens of thousands of caddies, at least. He beat the man on the ground until his eyes were full of smoke. For a moment, he didn't know what the occasion was. He looked back at Mishita blankly and said, "You were the one who beat me." After finishing speaking, he seemed to be a little unbelievable, followed by a bang, and fell into a coma. Mikita seemed to be still angry, stood up from him, and was about to continue beating him when she grabbed it. Luogu hurried over to pull Mikita away. Even if he was unprepared when he was awake, at least the body's stress response was still there, so he wouldn't be killed so easily. But what if a person in a coma is accidentally beaten to death? While he was pulling people, he was still a little confused. "Why are you so angry?" "He can become invisible." Mishita said matter-of-factly, "Pirates don't need to be caught, but those who can become invisible must die." Luogu's mind seemed to be washed away by the waves at this moment. "Why?" Mishita was stunned, as if she didn't know how to answer, and glanced at Dashki. "Tell me, should I be beaten to death?" Dashki seemed to have thought of something at this moment. Without saying a word, the sword was already unsheathed. "Captain, how much is this guy worth? You can deduct it from my dividends in the future." Mishita is right, the sea thieves don't need to be caught, but those who can become invisible must die. Seeing that the two women on the boat seemed to have reached an agreement, Luogu chained the one in front of him without saying a word. Successfully captured Absalom, one of the three weirdos, and received a bounty of 320,000 belly and 1 black iron coin. At the same time, this man's image immediately appeared in the fall, and he and Ace were together. Dashki and Mishita seemed a little disappointed when they saw this, and sighed at the same time. After all, since the captain has tied up the man, it means that this guy is eligible to be arrested. Even if he is a bit willful, he will definitely not disobey Luogu's decision at this moment. It's just that the two of them sighed at the same time, looking very disappointed by this. Luogu couldn't help but ask, "What's going on with you guys? What's going on with this guy? His abilities are too dangerous." Mishita said, "Look, what has become of Dashki because of this?" Luogu glanced at the white noodles all over Dashki's body, nodded and said, "That makes sense, but didn't you spread these white noodles? Although I am right, the cause is this guy." Mishita muttered in a low voice, "The key is, this guy is also invisible. Who knows whether he peeked at others when they were changing their clothes?" When Luogu heard this, he suddenly realized. After working on it for a long time, the key point turns out to be here. For a moment, he stared at Absalom in the cave, and his eyes sparkled. Of course he wasn't thinking about peeping. As a pirate hunter, he has very upright views. How could he use this ability to do such a hateful thing as peeping? What he cares about is that with this ability in the future, lurking and the like will become very simple. Moreover, he can also change his appearance. Comparing the two, he can simply lurk to the end of the world. After thinking about it, I secretly made a decision in my heart: you don't need to have Ace's ability, but you must get Absalom's ability. At this time, Dashki suddenly reacted, "Wait, Captain, you mean, this guy got our ship here, so this is not the Devil's Triangle at all?" No, Luogu smiled slightly at this time, "This is the Devil's Triangle. However, who told you that the Devil's Triangle is really so scary? Most of them are just rumors." He looked at the building not far away and smiled, "And for us, this must be paradise. Heaven." The two looked at Luogu together. Luogu said with a smile but not a smile, there is a group of famous pirates here, but it seems that it will be a bit troublesome to catch them now. In short, let's go up first. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate's Bounty, Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 195. In any case, Moonlight Moria is one of the Shishibukai. It is still difficult to explain many things about rashly going to the island to arrest people. After all, even if he really took Moonlight Moria to get the bounty, he might not be able to get it. After stuffing Isabram into the lower prison, Luogu took the two girls off the ship. As he walked, he thought about how to deal with the matter of the Shishibukai turning into real pirates. Without paying attention, I was stopped by a dog with 3 heads. The update is being updated. Please refresh the visit later. This chapter is working hard to updating, please refresh to visit later. Handsome guys and beautiful women who visit on mobile phones, please register as a member first. Register as a member of the site and use the bookshelf bookmark function for more convenient reading. If this chapter is nonsense like the author asking for tickets, please skip to the next chapter. Please bookmark this page first, so that you can read it later, otherwise you won't find this chapter later. Recommended author, Lin Yujianjian. Urban novel, The Best Son-in-Law Lin Yujianjian. https 3a2f2f.2 book 2f182 f18289 Brief introduction. When the master was leaving, he left Wen Tian a life-saving mantra that we kept at the bottom of the box, saying that if you practice diligently, you will have miraculous results. P.S. All the spells, Taoist formulas, secret techniques, etc. in this book come from our secrets. If you don't know the truth, don't practice it on your own. Remember to be cautious. E38080E69C80E4BDB3E5A5B3E5A969E97E7 BEB6B19F9A2997A8T59CB0E59D80F9APS 3A2F2F2F2F1A2F1A289 https 3A2F2F.2 book 2F1A2F1A289 3A2F2F2F9APS 3A2F2F2 book 2F182F18289 Chapter 1 Witnessing Yourself Being Cremated. I'm sorry, we've done our best, let's prepare for the funeral. The doctor's voice outside the ward was very soft, but Lin Yu on the hospital bed could hear it clearly. Maybe even the hearing becomes extra sensitive before death, especially the mother's cry, which is particularly sharp. Lin Yu was not the first because he sacrificed his life for righteousness. He didn't regret it, but felt sorry for his mother. His father died early, and his mother dragged him with his own hands. I don't know how much he suffered. Now he is admitted to the Qinghai City People's Hospital with excellent grades. Damn it! A good man really has no good reward, Lin Yu cursed in a low voice, his eyelids could no longer hold, and he slowly closed. My son! A shrill cry suddenly woke Lin Yu up. He opened his eyes and saw that he was standing at the end of the bed at this time, while his mother was crying on the bed. Mom, why are you crying? Am I here in a bad way? Lin Yu was overjoyed, thinking that he had recovered miraculously, reached out and patted his mother, and found that his hand had actually passed through his mother's body. The mother didn't respond in the slightest, and still threw herself on the bed and cried. Lin Yu's expression changed, and when he looked up, he saw himself lying on the bed, his face was dry and blue, and he was obviously out of anger. I'm dead. Lin Yu looked down at himself standing at the end of the bed, and found that his body was a little white and slightly transparent. Lin Yu was shocked, it turns out that people really have souls after death. No matter what he said or did, my mother couldn't feel it. With the help of the nurse, the mother reluctantly put on Lin Yu's shroud, and then the nurse transported his body to the funeral car. His mother got into the car and sat next to his body, holding his hand tightly. Tears kept pouring out of her red and swollen eye sockets. Don't worry. Mom has finished the things here. I'll go down and accompany you immediately. For her, her son is everything to her. When her son dies, her life in the world has no meaning. Hearing that his mother wanted to seek short-term reunion, Lin Yu was in a hurry, and lay down on the corpse like the scene of the revival in the movie, but it didn't work. Every time he sat up, only his soul was left. The car quickly arrived at the crematorium. After paying the fee, the staff simply put on makeup for Lin Yu and handed Lin Yu's mother a number plate. Then the incinerator pushed Lin Yu's body to the incineration hall. Do not. When the incinerator pushed his body into the incinerator, Lin Yu collapsed instantly. With the burning of his body, Lin Yu felt that his consciousness was weakening, and there were countless faint light spots scattered around his body, and his soul was slowly fading. At the same time, another world began to flash in front of his eyes, and all he could see was endless darkness, mixed with red flames and shrill screams. Hell! This was the first thought that flashed through Lin Yu's consciousness, and a strong sense of fear engulfed him instantly. His soul subconsciously rammed in the air, and the light spots were still floating out of his soul body, and the speed was getting faster and faster. The hell world in his eyes became clearer and clearer, and he could hear a mysterious hoarse voice calling him below. At this time, Lin Yu's body in the incinerator was almost burned out, and a jasper-colored pendant in the ashes suddenly glowed dazzlingly in the fire. This was left to him by his grandfather Lin Yu when he passed away. Since he was a child, his mother did not take it off when he wore the shroud. The light of the pendant became brighter and brighter, and then it burst with a bang. A ray of green light suddenly burst out of the pendant and attached to Lin Yu's soul. Immediately afterwards, an old voice came from his mind, "I am the saint of your ancestors. From today onwards, you will be my descendant. You will be my heir to the Tao, hang the pot to help the world, and save yourself." Then the voice dissipated, and a huge amount of information suddenly flooded into Lin Yu's mind. Medical Taoism, mysticism of practice, and some travel experiences of ancestors poured into Lin Yu's mind. With the information in his mind, Lin Yu felt very excited, as if he had opened the door to a new world. But this excitement is fleeting. What is the use of getting the inheritance of the secret technique? He is already a dead person who is about to go to hell. This thought flashed by, and a memory about rejuvenation suddenly popped into Lin Yu's mind. Memory shows that through reincarnation, people whose souls are not scattered after death can be reborn. However, Lin Yu's body had been reduced to ashes in the fire, but fortunately, there is a record of the method of reviving the damaged body. The body is destroyed, turned into a ghost, found, and then attached to it. Lin Yu sucked in a breath of cold air, meaning that his body was damaged, and if he wanted to be resurrected, he could only turn into a ghost through reincarnation and find someone else's body to possess. You must know that in human consciousness, ghosts are the incarnation of evil. Besides, if you get on someone else's body, isn't it equivalent to depriving someone else's life in disguise? After hesitating, Lin Yu's soul became weaker and weaker, only a phantom remained, and the voice in his ears became clearer and clearer. Lin Yu gritted his teeth, looked at the corpses being pushed into the incineration hall one after another, and suddenly came up with an idea: if the dead can't do it, then the living dead should be okay. A few minutes later, Lin Yu came to the largest vegetative care center in Qinghai City. Many vegetative people are unconscious and can't wake up all their lives. They only have their bodies alive. Lin Yu believes that choosing such a person to possess them is not considered murder. At first, Lin Yu went from ward to ward, looking for a suitable body. But I found that my consciousness is getting weaker and weaker, and it will soon disappear, and the call from hell is getting more and more urgent. Lin Yu didn't have time to think about it. He looked at a male vegetative person in his 20s, and when he remembered the revival technique, he suddenly turned into a plume of white smoke, and he crawled in without hesitation. You can't escape. At the same time, the call in his ear suddenly turned into a shrill scream, and then Lin Yu lost all consciousness. When Lin Yu woke up again, he only felt the glare of the glare, and it took a while to get used to it. Looking down, he was lying in the ward. Successful. Lin Yu almost cried out in excitement, sat up suddenly, glanced at his new body, couldn't wait to tear off the needle in his hand, and then jumped out of the bed, but as soon as his feet fell, his body staggered and fell to the ground. Maybe because of lying down for a long time, the muscles of this young man were slightly atrophied. Lin Yu staggered to get up, looked up at the calendar on the wall, and found that it was the second day. He touched the bed and the wall, and felt the cold temperature from his hands. It felt like a dream. Thinking of being resurrected today. After a little activity, he got used to this new body, and then he couldn't wait to rush out of the hospital. There is only one thing in his mind now, that is, to see his mother. At this time, the bun shop was crowded with people, and more than a dozen gangsters clamored for Lin Yu's mother to pay back the money. In order to perform surgery on Lin Yu's mother was forced to borrow hundreds of thousands in loan sharks. When they learned that Lin Yu was dead, the gangsters came to collect the debt impatiently. Don't worry, I sold the store in a few days, and I will return the money to you. Please leave first. Lin Yu's mother pleaded with red and swollen eyes, hoping to send them away as soon as possible. Her son had just left, and she didn't want him to leave peacefully. This rundown store of yours is only worth a few bucks. Your son is dead. Once we leave, if you run away, we don't care who gets the money, the leader of the yellow-haired gangster cursed. Don't worry, I will definitely not run away. I will collect enough money and return it to you right away. No matter what we say today, we will still get the money, Huang Mao refused. But I really have no money now. As you know, all the money has been spent on treating my son. Lin Yu's mother's heart was cut like a knife, and there was a hint of pleading in her hoarse voice. It's okay if you don't have any money, so let's do it. You can transfer your dilapidated house to us, and you will pay the debt. Huang Mao rolled his eyes and said his true purpose. Lin Yu's mother was slightly startled. The house was left by Lin Yu's grandfather. Although it was a bit old, it was in a good location. According to the current house price in Shanghai, it could be sold for at least 2 to 3 million. They were simply robbing it. Computer version with the fastest network update. But now that his son is dead and his home is gone, what's the point of keeping the house? After paying off the debt, he can go home in peace. Thinking of this, Lin Yu's mother nodded in despair. Just as she was about to agree, an angry shout suddenly came from outside the door. No, our house is worth at least a few million. This is robbery. Then Lin Yu rushed in with his new body in full force. Yeah, where did that bastard come from? It's none of your business. Huang Mao was furious. Looking at Lin Yu's hospital gown, he thought it was a lunatic who had escaped from somewhere, so he rushed over and slapped him with his hand. Lin Yu ducked subconsciously, stretched out his hand and pushed it. Huang Mao flew out in an instant, flying a full 5 or 6 meters, crossed an arc in the air, and slammed onto the table inside. Let me kill him. Huang Mao covered his chest and screamed twice, and then gave an order, and a dozen other gangsters rushed up immediately, surrounded Lin Yu with punches and kicks, and Lin Yu quickly raised his hand to fight back. Then there was a wailing sound in the steamed bun shop, and the little gangsters screamed again and again. More than a dozen of them went up together, and they didn't even touch the corner of Lin Yu's clothes, and Lin Yu's fists and feet hit them as if they were hit by a car. With just one punch, they couldn't get up from the pain. Lin Yu himself was extremely shocked. They all said that ghosts were extremely powerful, but he didn't expect it to be true. Moreover, in his eyes, these people's movements seemed very slow and easy to avoid. Alarm, alarm! Huang Mao was terrified by the scene in front of him. He had seen someone who could fight, but he had never seen someone who could fight like this. He was simply inhuman. Upon hearing that the police were about to be called, Lin Yu's mother rushed over, grabbed Lin Yu's hand, and said urgently, "Young man, they are calling the police. Come on, I will handle it here." First published on New Bai Chinese website. "Mom, what did you say? How can I leave you?" Lin Yu was about to burst into tears with joy, and it was great to see his mother alive. Hearing his name, his mother was slightly startled and looked at him blankly. Looking into his mother's eyes, Lin Yu suddenly realized that he was alive, but in a different body, and his mother didn't recognize him at all. "I'm sorry, Auntie, I think of my mother when I see you, so I can't help but blurt out, 'Don't mind.'" Lin Yu hurriedly made up a nonsense for fear of frightening his mother by revealing his true identity. "It's okay, boy, let's go quickly. Our family's affairs can't affect you," Lin Yu's mother said while pushing him out. Lin Yu didn't answer, he touched the chopsticks on the table and threw them. The chopsticks quickly shot at Huang Mao, and with a bang, he pinned Huang Mao's phone that had just pressed 110 to the wall. Huang Mao's face turned pale with fright. The chopsticks on the wall were only 1 centimeter away from his ears. If there was a slight deviation, his head would be nailed to the wall. "Help, kill, help!" Huang Mao screamed in fright, the grievance that could not be expressed in his voice. It was obvious that they owed him money first. "Stop shouting, I will pay back the money for Aunt Qin." Lin Yu said coldly that since he was resurrected, he should pay these debts by himself. "Young man, how can this be done? This is the first time you and I have met, how can I let you pay back the money for me?" Lin Yu's mother looked at Lin Yu with some doubts. For some reason, this young man gave her a feeling of déjà vu. She was not surprised that Lin Yu knew her surname. Many netizens knew about her son's courage to sacrifice his life for righteousness. Her name and contact information were also taken away. Many well-meaning people came to see her son off, but she refused. "Okay, this is what you said, then give us the money." Huang Mao doesn't care why Lin Yu pays back the money for others, as long as he can get the money, his mission will be completed. The fastest network update PC version. "Give me 3 days," Lin Yu said. Huang Mao was a little speechless. He said it so arrogantly that he thought he would be able to take out the money immediately. "Why don't you believe me?" Seeing that Huang Mao didn't speak, Lin Yu frowned and his tone was a little cold. believe it, but brother, you have to tell me your name." Looking at Lin Yu's cold eyes, Huang Mao couldn't help shivering. "Name? Yes, I was in such a hurry this morning that I didn't even have time to read this person's name. Don't worry, I will do what I promised you. In this way, 3 days later, you will still be here. Just come here, and I will return the money to you when the time comes." The reason why Lin Yu is so confident is all because of his body. He thought that since he could live in a daycare center, no matter how ordinary this young man's family was, he could at least get a dozen or 200,000 out of it. He would use it first, and then pay it back when he made money. Having seen Lin Yu's skills, Huang Mao didn't dare to say anything more. Just as he was about to nod his head in agreement, he suddenly stared out of the store with dazed eyes, as if attracted by something. Lin Yu also followed curiously and looked out, only to see a red BMW X5 came to the door at some point. As soon as the door opened, he stepped out with fair and slender legs, and then got out of the car, a tall man dressed in white beauty in simian dress. Book 1818289. The beauty in the long skirt brushed her long black hair and took off her sunglasses. Her fair skin and delicate face were so shocking that Huang Mao and his subordinates were stunned. Lin Yu couldn't help being attracted too. The beauty and temperament of this beauty are indeed top-notch. The beauty in the long skirt looked up at Beelzebub, frowned slightly, and walked in quickly. Book 1818289. Beauty, do you want to buy buns? What stuffing do you want? Lin Yu couldn't help but blurt out that he used to help his mother sell steamed buns, and it has become a conditioned reflex to see people like this. What did you call me? The beauty in the long skirt glanced at him coldly, her tone displeased. Beauty. Lin Yu felt that his name was fine, so he couldn't help but be a little puzzled. The first time he saw a beautiful woman, he still didn't want to hear it. The beautiful woman in the long skirt looked at him and said coldly, "Okay, he Jiarong, he has been in a coma for 2 months, and he doesn't even know his wife." Book 1818289. Book 1818289. Trial reading of content, Book 181828913426847.ht. Pirate's Bounty Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 196. The door slowly opened, but no one came out. Of course, it's not ghosts, zombies, ghosts, or anything like that. But a plate. The plate flew out in a whirl, and flew straight towards Luogu's head. It's a plate. Dashiki and Mikita were immediately excited, and they didn't know why they were so excited when they saw the plate, and they rushed out from behind Luogu in an instant. As soon as Mikita stretched out her hand, the plate fell into her hands. Just as he was about to feel proud, whoosh, whoosh, dozens of plates flew towards the 3 people from different directions and angles. Mishita was immediately overjoyed, the plates on the ship are about to be replaced. Her hands were flying immediately, but in the blink of an eye, all these plates had fallen into her hands, neatly. Then he brought it to Luogu like a treasure. "Captain, look, look." The voice was excited, as if Luogu had never seen a plate before. The corner of Luogu's mouth twitched, and he sighed helplessly. At this time, the door of the building in front of him had been fully opened. A woman with a gray face and obvious stitched scars looked at Mikita with hatred. To be precise, he was looking at the plate in Mikita's hand. "Why?" she said slowly. When Mishita heard the sound, she turned around and her hair stood up. "Zombie." With a wave of his hand, all the plates were thrown out, smashed to the ground with a clatter, and returned to hide behind Luogu in a blink of an eye. For a moment, the corners of Luogu's mouth twitched. There was really no other expression that could describe his inner feelings at this moment. Taking a deep breath, he forced a smile. This is really hard to explain. He didn't know what to say. The embarrassment of his own crew made him feel ashamed. Dashiki, who was uplifted with Mikita just now, is now together with Mikita again, and the 2 of them are holding hands, trembling at the same time. Hiss, SSSSSS, SSSSSS. Weird laughter came from the building. A moment later, another man stood up behind the woman who had already said why, but there was no follow-up. "This is really an unexpected guest, isn't it, to think that the famous pirate hunter would actually come here?" The man opened the door as he spoke. This is a man who looks a bit burly, but also a bit bloated. Has a pointed nose, pointed ears, a round head and a big belly. Like the woman, he also had many stitching marks on his body. He smiled and said, "Please come in, pirate hunter, Mr. Narasragu." Luogu smiled slightly, and was about to move forward, but his clothes were held tightly by Mikita and Dashiki. Looking back at the 2, Mikita whispered, "Captain, you can't go in, they are not human." "Yes, if you go in, you will definitely be eaten." Dashiki probably stayed with Mikita for too long, and contracted a lot of strange problems. Lao Gao's blue veins popped up on Luogu's forehead, and finally he patted the heads of the 2 of them helplessly. "Trust me. If there is magic." As soon as these words came out, those who trembled did not tremble, and those who were afraid did not fear anymore. The 2 girls stood up and looked at each other, as if they saw unprecedented courage in each other's eyes. In the end, they held hands and followed Luogu together. The two people inside the door parted ways to let three people in. In the dark mansion, the lights were suddenly lit. The next second, the door behind him creaked and slowly closed. Luogu didn't look back, looked at the man next to him with a smile and said, "This is an interesting place." The man nodded, "That's natural. The creatures here are also very lively." Luogu continued to smile, but the three-headed dog at the door did not follow in, so it was self-evident what he was referring to. The man's smile seemed to become a little stiff, but he could only nod his head. There was casual chatting every sentence, and a group of people entered the hall. "Everyone, you have been frightened a lot along the way. How about I treat you all to a meal first? After that, take a good rest, and then I will see you off from here." The man managed to maintain a smile and said to several people. Luogu looked at him without blinking, which made his forehead gradually sweat. On the contrary, Tashiki and Makita seemed to have discovered a new continent. "I'm sweating. Yeah, that means it's not a zombie. So, they don't eat people." "Probably." Luogu couldn't help being discouraged, and shook his head. "I haven't asked your name yet." "Oh, my name is Hobuk," the man introduced simply. "I am the owner of this place." "Well, where is Perona?" Luogu looked around and said, "There is no ghost of her hovering around, which makes me wonder if I really boarded that terrifying three-mast sail. After all, Moonlight Morias, I probably know something about my subordinates." As soon as this remark came out, it was like pressing the pause button. The whole world fell silent for a moment. Although Mishita and Dashki didn't know what was going on, they didn't dare to move when they saw the atmosphere and waited quietly for the next step. Huabake's expression gradually collapsed, and finally he sighed helplessly and said, "It seems that I can't hide it from you." "After all, not everything can be hidden from others," Luogu said with a smile. "In this world, there has never been a secret that will not be revealed. Then, since you know that this is the Shichibukai, Lord Moonlight Moria's terrifying three-mast sail, why do you still set foot here?" Huagubik suddenly became hardened, as if Moonlight Moria had brought him great courage. Luogu tilted his head and looked at him, and finally sighed, "Don't you know? It's not us who want to set foot here, but your people who brought us here." Huagubik was stunned, rolled his eyes, and immediately asked, "Where is Asabram?" "Of course it's where he should be," Luogu smiled. The atmosphere suddenly became tense again. But Dashki and Mishita had already heard it from this conversation. Here, it turns out to be the place of Moonlight Moria. King Shichibukai. In the past, Wang Xiakai Wuhei was indeed great, but what kind of people have not been seen following Luogu during this period? Shichibukai, a mere king, really doesn't care too much. For a moment, his back was straightened, and he seemed to be really fearless. Pirate's Bounty, Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 197. Seeing these two lifted their spirits, Luogu felt greatly relieved for a moment. He nodded with satisfaction, then looked at Huagubik opposite and said, "How about eating first?" Huabake had already felt that he had seen him before, but who would have thought that such a sentence would come in the blink of an eye? For a moment, he didn't know how to react. A question came out of his mouth subconsciously. The moment he met Luogu's eyes, he came back to his senses, nodded quickly and said, "Okay, please sit down." Sat down on the long dining table. Dashiki and Makita sat on each side, and the woman with sutures turned around and left without saying a word. Huagubik said with a smile, "Actually, your arrival is just a misunderstanding. After finishing your meal, you can leave at will." Luogu glanced at him and smiled slightly. "It's a pity to leave like this." "I see." Huabake nodded, "I will prepare a gift, which will definitely satisfy everyone." Luogu shook his head thoughtfully when he heard the words, and finally said, If you want to talk about gifts, I actually have something I hope to get. Oh, Hogbark brightened up. Although Moonlight Moria, who is the Kaiwilhe under the king, has no reason to be afraid of Rogu. But the achievements this man has made since he went to sea are indeed extraordinary. If the other party didn't see what happened here, it would be best to send the other party away as soon as possible. Immediately said, if there is anything you want, you can speak. Moonlight Moria is relatively lazy on weekdays, and many things are sent to the people below to do. Hobuk said this with full confidence. Luogu looked at the other person's face, and after a moment of silence, he said, how about you come with me? Huogubak was stunned for a moment, with a shy look on his face. Isn't this bad? Daisuke and Mikita also quickly winked at Luogu, and were unwilling to agree to this proposal. The corner of Luogu's mouth twitched. There is one doctor missing on my boat. The shortcomings are there, whether you ignore them or not. After the previous battle with Ace and the others, it would be much better if there was a doctor on the dress, even if it was just someone who knew something about medical treatment. At that time, I would never suffer such a big crime, and finally got a virus infection. Why didn't I become a zombie? Now that he knew what the problem was, Luogu naturally had to find a way to solve it. Although Luogu was not very fond of the guy in front of him, he was the kind of doctor that even Chopper admired very much. Regardless of his character, at least his medical skills were trustworthy. Hogubuk didn't expect to hear such words. This is simply poaching. By doing this, is he really not afraid of offending Moonlight Moria? After thinking about it, I'm probably not afraid. Fire Fist Ace, Blackbeard Tiki, all fell under this man's hands. The other party obviously has the utmost confidence, so he can ignore Moonlight Moria. It was extremely tangled for a while, and finally shook his head. I have no way to promise you about this matter. Although Moonlight Moria has entrusted him with many things here, he has no way to deal with his own ownership. It seems that Luogu just asked a simple question, and after confirming that it is impossible, it doesn't matter. Soon, the meal came. However, the food was unappetizing. The woman who hated the plates just poured the food on the table. Even soup. Hobuk seems to be very used to this. He just stretched out his tongue and licked the table. Luogu looked at it and decided that it was a little off-putting, so he simply stood up. Speaking of which, I haven't seen Perona here yet, isn't she here? Yes, Hogubuk said, but I want to confirm, do you know her? I don't know. Luogu shook his head. I've heard of it, I'm quite curious. I'll introduce him later, Hogbark said. Luogu smiled and said, I'm starting to like you a little bit. But I already have someone I like, Hogubuk said, rolling his eyes. Then Asabram. As a pirate hunter, I am also reasonable, Luogu said with a smile. Look at you, you don't have a bounty on you, so I have always been very polite to you. Did not see it? This is your problem, Luogu said, but your friend seems to be different from you, and he also disappeared on my ship and did some inappropriate things. So as a hunter, of course I can't feel free to let it go. You want to hand him over to the Navy? Hobuk suddenly raised his head. Luogu looked at him and suddenly laughed. Actually, you can ask Moonlight Moria to go directly to ask for people when the time comes. After all, you should have immunity. Why go to all this trouble? Hogubuk sighed. Leave it to me directly. I will pay the bounty he can provide you. Luogu shook his head. No, this is not the same thing. No matter how he looked at it, Hogback felt that this was the same thing. The other party said that, maybe he just didn't want to hand it over to himself. As expected, it was better to avoid conflicts and the like. Facing a guy who gave Fire Fist and Blackbeard to the Navy, Hogback felt that it was not shameful to give in. Immediately sighed, I understand. As long as you understand, Luogu smiled and said, speaking of which, are there any other pirates here? If so, I can do it for you. No. Hwabak's head was shaking like a rattle. It's boring, Luogu sighed in disappointment. To be honest, he was quite excited before coming. After all, it was Moonlight Moria. This guy seemed to be worth more than million. But now there is really no suitable reason to take this guy away. There is not enough evidence for many things, and there is not enough layout. There is no way to deal with Crocodile. After all, meeting at sea is an accident in itself. Then, the only gain from this trip is probably a Sabram. Speaking of which, why is there a bounty on this guy? He pondered for a while, and suddenly felt that something was not quite right. He knew how special his golden fingers were. If it was a pirate, he would be able to see the 4 lines of characters protruding from his body from a long distance away. But a Sabram didn't. Invisibility shouldn't be able to block this. However, when he caught it, a bounty prompt appeared. Why is this? Luogu fell into confusion. Golden Finger pointed out a bug. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate's Bounty, Don't Run Away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 198. Luogu's Golden Finger's current ability has basically been figured out. The pirate's words immediately showed a prompt, including 4 items including the name and the bounty. These 4 lines themselves also revealed the location of the pirate. After the capture, you can get a bounty, and after beheading, you can get half of the bounty. Through capture, pirates will appear in the cave. After a room meets the conditions of 5 people, you can get a key of the cave, which can be used to randomly draw an ability possessed by these 5 people. In addition, you can buy coins in the store to improve your skills. Then there is nothing else. But when facing a Sabram, these 4 lines of words did not appear, and the ability of personal invisibility should not be able to stop Goldfinger. That at least shows that before being caught by himself, a Sabram does not have the qualifications of a pirate. But after being captured by myself, why was there a bounty reminder? Luogu fell into thought for a moment, and Hobak carefully observed his appearance, wondering what this guy was thinking about. But in the face of Luogu, he really didn't have much spirit. He didn't care much about the other party's fascination or thinking. Suddenly, Luogu stood up and said, "Okay, if that's the case, then there is nothing more to say between us. If you want to know a Sabram, let Moonlight Moria directly ask the important people in the Navy." After finishing speaking, he stood up, turned around and walked out. There is no way to catch Moonlight Moria now, and it is more troublesome to actually do it. It is very likely that the efforts will be in vain, and it may lead to some kind of confrontation between oneself and the Navy. It's okay to catch a Sablam without revealing the identity of the other party. If you continue to attack them now, it doesn't make sense. Unless he can immediately win the identity of Chi Wuhei, otherwise, there is no need to fight this battle. The most important thing is that something happened to Goldfinger, and he wanted to go back and think about the possibilities. Hobak hesitated to speak, but finally he could only nod his head. "Then I will send you away." With Hwabake sending them out, it was naturally different from when they came. The road was unimpeded, and in a blink of an eye, he had arrived at the docking position of the big ship. Taizi Kangsuk looked back at Hobak, and after thinking for a while, he said, "If one day you don't want to continue hanging around here, you can consider coming to me on the ship, or you can also consider becoming a pirate, and if we meet at sea, we will definitely have a beautiful encounter." Hobake smiled, not knowing how to respond to these words. He honestly sent the other party onto the boat, then opened the door, and let Luogu and his party leave, until Luogu's big boat completely disappeared from sight. Then he let out a sigh of relief and wiped his forehead. Cold sweat. It feels like expelling the plague. Then I began to think about how to tell Moonlight Moria about this matter. After all, what happened today is a bit embarrassing for me. However, considering Luogu's troubles, it is acceptable to settle the matter by throwing a little embarrassment at him. Then there is the matter about Isabram, which is another troublesome thing. Luogu didn't care how Hogubak dealt with these things. He was a little regretful that he didn't see Moonlight Maria when he came to the horrible bark. But then he thought about it, what's so good about an ugly monster? If the Empress was here, he would definitely have to see if she was really as beautiful as the rumors said. The three beauties of One Piece should not have earned their names. The big ship floated in the wind, and the sky above them suddenly became bright and bright. At this time, Dashki and Mishita breathed a sigh of relief. No matter who the other party was, the weird atmosphere in that place just now still made them feel that something was wrong. The current environment, which seems to have returned to the sun, immediately gave them the illusion of being reborn. Makita ran around excitedly, and even took out a plate from her arms to show off to Luogu. I don't know when it was secretly hidden. Dashki felt ashamed after being excited. She always felt that she had lost an adult to Luogu this time. She hoped that she would have a chance to save the situation in the future. A new round of practice began immediately. Luogu went to the lower prison to take a look at Isabram. The guy was a little surprised when he saw Luogu. You are still alive. The ship had already entered the terrifying three-mast sail just now. In his opinion, as long as Luogu and the others entered, there was absolutely no possibility of leaving alive. However, they left alive. Luogu chatted with him for a few words, but the words were not speculative, and finally turned and left. It seems that the answer is not in him. While thinking about it, he walked to his room on the second deck. As soon as he entered the room, he saw a small thing floating on the roof, flying all over the sky, and it looked a little cute. However, the ghost-like appearance and the constant depressing voice made Luogu raise his brows instantly. Suddenly, that little soul split into three and came straight to Luogu. Luogu thought for a while, but didn't resist. Instead, he wanted to try how terrible the so-called negative soul was. Seeing that Luogu had no intention of resisting, the ghost also seemed surprised, but passed through him in the next second. Special emotions rushed into my heart immediately, forgiving Luogu's willpower. All thoughts were lost for a while. He looked at the world in front of him blankly, and suddenly felt that he was incompatible with this world. He should not appear here, he should not exist here, he should die. Perhaps, he should have died on the sea back then. He slowly sat on the ground and began to savor this negative meal. After 2 or 3 seconds passed like this, he suddenly raised his head, and all the feelings he had just now disappeared without a trace, just like a hallucination. Oh! He breathed out softly, it's really scary. While talking, he looked up and saw a girl holding a parasol squatting in front of him, looking at him curiously. She has recovered so quickly. The girl looked at Luogu curiously. Should I say that he is indeed a famous pirate hunter? Perona. Luogu looked at the other party, the body or the soul. Do you know me well? Perona tilted her head and looked at Luogu, then grinned. Guess what state I am in now? Luogu smiled, not interested. After finishing speaking, he shouted to the door, Dashki, use your fastest speed to check every room on the ship for strangers. Pirate's bounty, don't run away. Author, The Desolate Little Purity. Chapter 199. Perona was stunned for a moment, then laughed. Is it so interesting? Trust me, it's going to get more interesting soon. As soon as Luogu finished speaking, he heard Dasaiki's voice from outside the door, Captain, there is a person sleeping in the kitchen cupboard. Perona was speechless for a moment. How could it be so fast? Luogu was a little surprised. You are actually on the boat. You thought I wasn't on the ship. Why did you ask your crew to find me? It's just a try, Luogu said with a smile. Now, we seem to be able to have a good talk. Perona nodded. turned around and disappeared from the floor. On the other end, Mikita was cautiously looking at Perona, who was sleeping in the cupboard. Although she didn't know how this guy appeared here, this kind of behavior of suddenly boarding the boat without saying hello would obviously not be welcomed. Suddenly Perona stretched her arms, yawned big, and smiled slightly. "Hello." "Oh, hello," Mishita responded subconsciously. After reacting, she immediately frowned and said, "Who are you?" "My name is Perona." Perona smiled. "You can call me Princess Mononoke." She walked out of the cupboard naturally, but Mishita was already trembling. "Ghost." He Perona smiled at her. Then Mishita suddenly snorted coldly, "Liar." No, Perona was stunned for a moment. Why did she suddenly come to the conclusion that she was lying? The problem is, she was not lying. If you were a ghost, why would you be hiding in the kitchen and stealing food? "I didn't steal anything." "Why did you sleep in the kitchen cupboard if you didn't steal anything?" "How should I explain this?" "No matter how you explain, it's useless, you liar." Mikita was furious. "The kitchen is an important place, a guy like you who doesn't understand it can't appear here casually." "Then I'll go out." "I want to run away after eating something secretly." "What do you want?" "Stay still and wait for the captain's decision." So, after circling for a long time, it's still the same as before. Perona was a little speechless. Is there really no problem with the crew of this ship? At this moment, two people walked in from the kitchen door. Rogu brought Dashki in, and Perona's eyes suddenly lit up. "You are Noro's Rogu? Please tell your crew first." "I really didn't steal anything in the kitchen." Rogu thought for a moment and said, "Then why are you in the kitchen?" "I thought you would be different." Perona was dumbfounded. The people on the boat seemed not to be normal. "Okay, sit down first." Rogu pointed to the dining table next to him, and then sat down with Perona. Behind her, Mikita and Dashiki stared at her from left to right, as if they were worried that she would steal food while they were not paying attention. Perona was a little speechless, and said to Rogu, "Now, you have two choices." "Hey." Rogu was startled. "Shouldn't it be that I give it to you? Why did it become that you gave it to me?" "It's all the same." Perona didn't care. Rogu didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so he had to say, "Okay, tell me what these two choices are." "First, you send me back." Perona said, "I just came up this ship of yours out of curiosity. As a result, you came back suddenly, and then I hid, and now I was brought out by you. You guys have to be responsible." A theory full of loopholes. Rogu shook his head. "First of all, since you know who I am, there is no possibility of you getting on the ship out of curiosity. You must have some purpose, and, at the beginning of the ship, there is a chance to appear directly. In fact, the result is not much different from now. If there is any misunderstanding, make it clear. Then if you want to leave, you can leave at any time. The reason why you did not leave should be because of the existence of that purpose, so now saying such words is undoubtedly paving the way for your real purpose. Tell me, what is the second option?" "Let me stay on the ship," Perona said with a smile. The terrifying three-mast sail stayed for too long and was a bit boring. "So, I plan to see what the life of a pirate hunter is like." "What?" Mishita and Daska spoke at the same time, then shook their heads resolutely. "No." "Why?" Perona asked them. Mikita was the first to question. "You will sneak into the kitchen to eat while everyone is unprepared." Daisuke is the second one. "You have unknown origin and unknown purpose, we shouldn't take in a guy of unknown origin." "But your captain seems to know me very well." Perona looked at Rogu. "In other words, they can make the decision for you." Rogu held his chin, glanced at her, and suddenly grinned. "Interesting. What are you going to do on the ship? Obey my orders, become one of the crew, or are you going to be free, eat and drink from me? But if you don't listen to me and make different choices, my answers will naturally be different. Since I plan to see the life of a pirate hunter, Of course I can't do nothing, Perona said. That's it? During the time I stay on the ship, I am willing to obey your orders. But if I have one day you get tired of this kind of life, and when you want to leave, you can't stop it? Is it so free? Luogu thought for a while and said, one thing is, it's okay for you to leave, but you can't suddenly plan to leave when facing a strong enemy. If in my plan, you are planned to be one of the combat forces of this ship, then you must work hard for this, and at least complete the combat mission I have arranged for you. If you want to leave at that time, I will not stop you. It makes sense, Perona nodded. Otherwise, the opponent who could have been defeated might have failed because of this. If you failed, you might die in battle. I just hope to experience a different life, but I didn't harm you. I intend to die, so I agree to your request. Then, that's it. Luogu stood up and said to Makita, arrange a room for her, it doesn't have to be too good. That's too harsh. Perona was stunned. Love can't live. Makita stared. Since Rogu had already spoken, there was no reason not to do it. He was already reluctant, but Perona still had an opinion, and she was aggrieved for a while. Okay, now that this is the case, why don't I live here? I hope this won't be a decision I regret. Perona stood up and followed Makita out the door. Dashki couldn't help but said, I always feel that she has other purposes. Is it really okay to just take her in like this? Luogu smiled slightly, it doesn't matter, at least it's a combat power, just be more careful at ordinary times. Her combat power is actually very strong.